another short episode, a quickie if you like, of Better Late and Clever. And some weeks ago I was invited to interview somebody very interesting, and I went up past Beacon, Llandovery to Llandilo. Lovely setting, nice bungalow, to meet Alan Goodwin. Now he is 95 years old. He's an ex-paediatrician, amongst other things, because he didn't start out as that, as you will hear. And we had a lovely interview. But what I'm going to say now, straight away, is that there's a part 2 to this interview, which will be more involvement of Alan. All right? And Alan has written this book, The Dark Side of the Moon, right? And it's a little pamphlet, as you can see the thickness of the blooming thing. And it's written really, really pleasantly in his own style. So that's just a little introduction to things. We had a fabulous time, and the tinkling in the background, people say, what about background noises? Well, the tinkling of bells is his dogs popping back and forth through the door and ringing the bell to warn people in and out of the house. Very interesting, lovely day, fabulous setting. I had a smashing time, and they did have the kettle and a cup of coffee. So this is the 9th now, I think, episode of Better Late and Clever. Yes, is it the 8th, is it? Oh, yes, the 8th episode of Better Late and Clever. Enjoy it, because I thoroughly did when I was recording it. We're off and running. Over to you, Alan.
Howdy. What would you like me to do?
Well, we come from the same sort of area, don't we?
Yes.
That area of Cardiff. I mean, we sort of Grangetown and Canton are quite close. Yeah. So if you can start out in Grangetown, what was Grangetown like that we just managed to remember?
It depends. Grangetown was the second place I've lived in Cardiff. We were in Canton before. I went to Roath Park, or Roath, to a flat with my mother. My dad had died when I was 8.
Oh, yeah.
And from acute perforated ulcer. She was a penniless widow, but managed to get a little flat in Roath. And then the war came in 1939, and we moved to Grangetown to a flat with another person she had met and became her second husband for the rest of the time till she died, about 10 years, 15 years later. And Grangetown was a lovely place with lots of different nationalities, lots of businesses, busy. And along came the war and soon put an end to all that. We lived in a little flat in Grangetown for the years of the war, 1940, 41, 42, 43. In fact, we were still there when I got married for the second time in 1979, I think it was. Don't say that. You think it was? No, I knew it was. But I was living somewhere else.
Did Grangetown take a bombing at all?
Yes, Grangetown. There's a famous blitz. The exact date of which I'm not quite sure. I think it was 1941, when there were about 400 houses destroyed, as many people as that, and lots of places bombed. And my school that I just started a year and a half before was bombed to the ground and caught fire. Same with the girls' school next door to us at Howard Gardens. And despite all that, we managed to finally finish the Central Welsh Board, CWB, in 1944-45. That was when the end of the war came, with the collapse of Japan as bit in the war, and Europe. And I found myself then working in the gas board as a clerk, to be an office boy. Not ever dreaming that 3 years later, I'd be changing my mind to something medical. But that's another story.
Did you tell me that your experiences during school life were wartime?
Yes.
problematic.
When there was no bombing, no war, it was quite nice going to school on a bus, number 7 bus, all the way from Grangestown, non-stop, all the way to Howard Gardens.
And where was Howard Gardens? I don't remember. Where was it in Cardiff?
Howard Gardens, if you went from town out on the Newport Road that goes to Newport,
Yeah.
and then went underneath the main railway bridge at Queen Street, then on your right-hand side was Howard Gardens, tucked away behind the Cardiff Foreign Infirmary.
I know, yeah.
So they were very handy.
I remember it.
Howard Gardens School, and that was where. No, not that. That's my dog's trying to get in through the alarm. Yes. So Howard Gardens was there for central Cardiff and got bombed by mistake, I think.
And where did you shelter from the bombs if you were caught out?
If you were at home, we had an Anderson shelter out in the back. We were upstairs over a butcher's shop, a flat, and he used to throw his carcasses and bits of meat out through the back window onto the earth on top of the area shelter. So when we went to the area shelter, we found it seething with rats. So we decided we're not going to go and sleep, and it was water up to your ankles. So we decided we'd sit on the staircase during any air raids and hope for the best. Which is a bit silly, because if you're sitting on a wooden staircase and it gets a hit or a near hit, the whole thing would collapse down another 20 feet into the cellar of the butcher's shop to join the rats and the bits of meat. But we never took any damage to the house, thank God.
No, that was
nearby there were huge areas destroyed, a little further away from us, on the way to Cowbridge Road, Canton. But if you were in the bus going to school and there was an air raid warning, you had to stop instantly wherever you were and find shelter outside in the street. Often for me, our bus would just about get us past the Cardiff Castle, the front gate, and the alarm would go off. The bus would stop, everybody would go out and go into the castle. You say, what a funny place to shelter. Well, it wasn't. We were in the walls of the castle. They were about 20 feet thick. And there were maybe several hundred people, all different buses and means of transport. And we stayed there while the banging, crashing and air raid guns and bombs were going off. Maybe 2 or 3 hours later, we get the all clear. The sirens would sound a sustained note, and not going up and down, ooh, but a sustained note. And we could go back out and join our bus. It was still in the same place. When the driver was happy, we're all back. Ding, ding, off we go up the road now, another 10 minutes to Howard Gardens School. Perhaps you have to stop again in 10 minutes and shelter somewhere else. In the cinemas, in any buildings that were made available for us to be looked after. And on the way, if you happen to have to walk, because the bus couldn't come up the streets, we were covered in hose pipes that had been putting the fires out the previous night or during that time. It was common for us kids to pick up lumps of jagged metal about the size of your size of a good sized nut, and it was anti-aircraft shell casing that had exploded amongst the enemy aircraft, but it had come down to earth. And we would pick those up like conkers. So you'd end up with a collection of a pocket full of conkers, providing the heat had gone out of them. And you could play with conkers with them instead.
They had to wait though, didn't you? You couldn't pick them up straight away when they hurt.
Well, if you're lucky enough, they come down the previous night. So
right, pick them up
3 o'clock in the afternoon, so we'd say. And sometimes I got to school in time was to get the bus and come home. But you had to show your nose and show you made it up until. But that only went on for a couple of years, 2 years, I think, and then that was the end of hand-to-hand warfare, if you like. The war front shifted away to Europe, thank God. And we carried on my education until 1945.
So what was the qualifications? Because nowadays it's all GCSEs.
Yeah, equivalent to O-level, O-level. For maths, physics, chemistry, etc. 8 subjects altogether. And if you were clever enough, you went on to do A-levels. I'm not quite sure what the equivalent is today.
Well, I think A-levels are still there, but it's the intermediate sort of exams that they've changed. But,
for some strange reason, I didn't pass. I got 49% out of 50%. In English language, can you beat it? I thought I spoke very well, thank you. But that wasn't it. showing what you knew about literature and so forth in the English language. Also chemistry, that evaded me. So I had to resit chemistry and English language a couple of years later in order to get the CWB, the Central Welsh Board, O-level equivalent of 8 subjects. And then if I wanted to study A-levels, I could do, but not until I got those.
And did you go on to study A's?
Yes.
You got some A's?
Yes, I went back, I had a job for 2 years in the gas board, 3 years in the gas board as a clerk. And I then got called up into the RAF to do my national service, but they made me train as a male nurse. So I was all that keen when I came out of the Air Force 2 years later to perhaps pursue a medical career. That's when I needed the A-levels. So that's when I had to go back to night school to get physics, to get chemistry and English language, going to evening classes from 7 o'clock until 9 o'clock, do them, pass the exams. Then I could say 3 years later, I'm now ready to go to the Technical College in Cathays Park and study A-levels, physics, chemistry, botany, zoology. If I passed those in 1 year, then I could become a medical student, providing I was given a place. There's only 50 places awarded per year, but for some reason they took pity on me, thought perhaps I was a very keen bloke, maybe. And so that was the story of how I started in medical college in 19, whatever it was.
How long were you in medical training?
Went to 6 years, including the A-level year. 5 years of clinical medicine, 1 year of A-levels. So I got my A-levels in a year. It was hard work, but I did. What pleased me was I was a fresh brain coming to a new subject, and it meant that I enjoyed everything they gave me, and not saying, oh dear, here it is again, saying this is wonderful.
What branch of medicine did you finally get into?
You train for your 2 years anatomy and physiology, and then 3 years clinical around the wards in the hospital, and you become generally trained. You can then pick whether you want to be specialised in surgery or you specialise in general medicine or hospital medicine. And there's a big opening of field of what you can do, but it means more study. And to get to be a consultant, as I did eventually, took me 10 years.
Oh,
so that's the story of that. But I did my training in Cardiff, in the Cardiff Royal Infirmary at Llandaff Hospital, and then qualified in 1979. And then we wondered what to do next. Well, at that time, a young Australian surgeon, Dennis Kermode, lovely guy and a pretty wife, had come from Western Australia, in Perth, where they just opened a new medical school and were looking desperately for doctors to staff this and give it a bit of oomph. So we were headhunted.
right.
For £10 I could go as an immigrant. My wife and I, we'd been married 2 years earlier, Thelma, and she was a nurse, I was a doctor. Nothing could be easier. No children, just us to go and try and see if we could improve the life for the Australian medical students. And it was wonderful. A lovely life in Australia. I was there until 1960. When? 6 years later. Yes, 1966 I came home.
So where were you in? Where did you live in Australia? Did you move about or?
Perth.
Perth.
In Perth, Western Australia. We had a little house first of all. My very first job, down by the sea, beautiful. If I did 3 nights or 3 weeks on casualty, then I'd have to work all through the night. But when you're finished in the morning at 8 o'clock, you could go home and come back in the next evening at 8 p.m. I'd go home on my bicycle, which is only about 3 miles up the road to the seaside, swim in the sea, have some breakfast, go to bed for about 8 hours, get up, go back to the hospital. A lovely life.
It sounds very, very. They do say if you're working at something that you enjoy, you don't do a day's work in your life.
No. And then there were periods of 6 months medicine, 6 months surgery, 6 months something else, till you'd done 3 years almost in Royal Perth Hospital. And then the time came to emigrate into another branch of medicine, which was general practice.
This is a footnote.
A footnote, yep. My feet were standing on the roof of the Royal Perth Hospital in Western Australia on my first night in casualty. And I found that it was not just in casualty, but I had to do all the emergency blood tests and the other things that had to be done. I had never done anything like this in my year in Britain. They demanded much more of me. It was a higher standard. I had to cross-match blood for transfusion. I had to spin urines down and look for infection in the urine. I had to do portable x-rays. And I thought, my God, they're paying me well, but they're working me hard. Anyway, I enjoy it.
5 years in general practice.
5 years in general practice I spent.
Yeah.
And in that time, I'm learning all the time to be able to and more become proficient in anesthesia. So I gave anesthetics for the cases that needed to be done in the general practice town, in the GP hospital, not in the big hospital, but in the general hospitals in the towns. So I learned anesthetics and I learned other skills, pediatrics, and where I eventually settled as a paediatrician when I returned to Britain in 1966.
And that's where you continued?
Yeah, that's where I continued. And my wife did not want to go back to Australia, so we stayed at home. But instead of which, I went into paediatric training in various hospitals in Cardiff, and in Swansea and Merthyr, dotted around, picking up more experience all the time, till in 1979 I could become a fully trained consultant paediatrician and stayed there until I retired when I was 70.
Yeah, great. Did you I think something that I've got in my research, didn't you have an interesting experience with Princess Diana?
Yes, Princess Diana came to open a new unit that we'd fundraised and pressed for months, and that was a place at the end of our 30-bed ward specifically for teenagers, or between the ages, say, of 12 and 17. And there were places where the parents could stay, 2 rooms. So it was an attempt to make hospital a little more livable for these who were classed otherwise as being children, when they weren't, they were teenagers. So we spent a couple of million raising funds, and the place was eventually finished and done, and it had to be opened. And fortunately, they asked me, would you like to show Princess Diana the unit when it's opened? I said yes. On the day it came, I think it was in 1977, I can't quite remember. Anyway, it's there, it's on the wall if you're going to the hospital, a plaque, and she turned up, and the crowd of people all wanted to be Princess Diana. And she came through the door in a lovely apple green skirt, short skirt, and nice jumpers and pretty hairstyle and lovely rings. She came through the door and they all wanted to shake her hand. And she came over to me and I held up my hand and shook it and I said, thank you, Your Majesty, for coming today. She stopped me by putting her hand on my chest and stroked me twice. My tie, it had Looney Tunes cartoon figures on my tie. Said, I love your tie. And I said, oh, it's Looney Tunes, Your Majesty. My children love it. Oh, my children too. I said, would you like to see some children? Yes, please. So I took her in. Everybody's glowering with jealousy.
Oh, yes.
Because I had been touched by the royalty. And I took her around about 20 children. And she sat by the beds, talked to them. Her pen ran out halfway and she said, dear, my pen has run out again. Have you one? I said, yes, you can have mine. Gave her the royal pen. And she said, I want to be naughty sometimes. Instead of putting yours, Doris, I want to put yours, Doris, rather than yours, what was her name?
Diana.
Diana. Yep, Diana. She was charming, so.
Yeah.
And then she disappeared and thanked me very much.
So there you are. Did you enjoy that? I did. It was fabulous. Really, really good. And like I said, part 2 on the way. And part 2 will involve Alan's book. All right. So that's another thing to look out for it, so that you can recommend it then to your friends. So that was it. 8th one in the can, I think they call it. And watch out for episode 2. What I'll mention to you is Better Late Than Clever has not been going that long. In fact, we have had no grand opening ceremony. But some weeks ago, I think it was about 3 weeks, we went to the old Park Hotel in Cardiff, and we attended the TPAS Tapas award ceremony, for which we had been nominated as shortlist. We didn't make the title, of course, but apparently being shortlisted is really commendable in this day and age. I don't know anything about this. And the picture will follow to see the team that went down there and how we had a very nice night in the Park Hotel. And big thanks there to United Welsh who sponsored us to get there. Well, thank you very much for watching and listening to the good news, where I've heard, this is a bit of a secret, I've heard that we are involved in a new award ceremony. I'm going to have to get a bigger mantelpiece for my house. Been nice to talk to you. See you next time.